Welcome to Irish Military Diaspora ASMR. In this ASMR recording, I am going to talk a bit about the Irish Military Diaspora and mention some notable groups and people associated with the diaspora. I'm going to be reading from Wikipedia quite a bit, as it's useful to have something to reference, as I find if I try and talk off the cuff, I tend to ramble a bit, and that wouldn't be a very satisfying or relaxing listen. I'm going to start on the page of the Irish Military Diaspora. You may hear typing sounds and clicking sounds as I navigate between the pages. So, quoting Wikipedia here, the Irish Military Diaspora refers to the many people of either Irish birth or extraction who have served in overseas military forces regardless of rank, duration of service, or success. Many overseas military units were primarily made up of Irishmen or members of the Irish Military Diaspora and had the word Irish, an Irish place name, or an Irish person in the unit's name. Irish named military units took part in numerous conflicts throughout world history. The first military unit of this kind was in the Spanish Netherlands during the 80 Years' War between Spain and the Dutch. A notable example is that of Owen Roe O'Neill. So, in short, the Irish Military Diaspora is a sort of phenomenon of Irish people tending to be more overrepresented than not in foreign militaries. This is also kind of stemming from and contributed to the fighting Irish stereotype, if you will, or general notion. I'm sorry, I had to cut the recording there for a second whilst I coughed. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the Irish Commandos. And the Irish Commandos were volunteer military units of guerrilla militia, and they fought in the Second Boer War alongside the Boers against the British forces. I'm going to read a bit on the Wikipedia page under the heading Irish Transvaal Brigade. The Irish Transvaal Brigade, also known as the Wreckers Corps, was organised by John McBride, who was then employed at the Band Mines. Most of the battalion strength brigade were Irish or Irish American miners living in the Transvaal who were willing to fight with the Boers against the British. The brigade was bolstered during its campaign by a contingent of volunteers who came from Chicago and by a variety of Irish volunteers who travelled from America and Ireland for the purposes of joining the brigade. Irishmen on the side of the British Army also fought in the Boer War, which symbolised one of many moments in Irish history in which Irishmen had divided localities that ultimately led them to fighting each other. John McBride wrote his own account of the Irish Transvaal Brigade, which can be found in Anthony J. Jordan's edited version of the writings of McBride. The brigade would come to be known as McBride's Brigade after their commander, John McBride. It was operational from September 1899 to September 1900, when the brigade fought in about 20 engagements, with 18 men killed and about 70 wounded from a complement of no more than about 300 men at any one time. When it disbanded, most of the men crossed into Mozambique, which was a colony of neutral Portugal. Colonel John Y. F. Blake, a former U.S. Army officer, was the brigade's commander. When he was wounded, his second-in-command, Major John McBride, took command. Prior to the siege of Ladysmith, the commandos were involved in guarding the artillery under Carolus Johannes Trichart. The brigade also provided signal service at the Battle of Modderspruit. At the siege of Ladysmith, they serviced the famous Boer artillery piece called Long Tom, and they fought at the Battle of Colenso. Having worked in the gold mines, they had a well-deserved reputation as demolition experts. They delayed the British advance on Pretoria by blowing up bridges. The brigade disbanded after the Battle of Bergendal. The brigade received letters of thanks before they left South Africa from State Secretary F.W. Wright's Commandant General Louis Botha and General Baron de Viljoen. I apologise if my pronunciation of certain Dutch words is subpar. Next, we're going to be talking about someone who is called Peter von Lacy, who was an Anglo-Irish military commander. He served in the Imperial Russian Army. He was one of the most successful Russian imperial commanders before Rumyantsev and Zurov. During a military career that spanned half a century, he professed to have been present at a total of 31 campaigns, 18 battles, and 18 sieges. He died at Riga, of which he for many years served as governor. Peter von Lacy, he was born in Killeedy in County Limerick, in what was then the Kingdom of Ireland, in 1678. He became a governor of what was then, I believe it should say here, he was the governor of Livonia. He also served, he served, his allegiance here is listed as Kingdom of England, Kingdom of France, Holy Roman Empire, and the Russian Empire, with the majority of his service being with the Russian Imperial Army, for a total of about 51 years. Next, we're going to look at a battalion called St. Patrick's Battalion. This is one of the more interesting ones in my opinion. It's one of my favourite. The St. Patrick's Battalion, or in Spanish, if I can attempt to pronounce it. I'm not too good with certain sounds in Spanish, but Batallón de San Patricio. I know that certain letters are pronounced differently in different parts, and I've probably got a few of them wrong, but I try my best. I had to cut it there again. The St. Patrick's Battalion, formed and led by John Riley, was a unit of 175 to 700 immigrants and expatriates of European descent who fought as part of the Mexican Army against the United States in the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 1848. Most of the battalion's members had deserted or defected from the United States Army. The battalion served as an artillery unit for much of the war. Despite later being formally designated as two infantry companies, it still retained artillery pieces throughout the conflict. In many ways, the battalion acted as the sole Mexican counterbalance to the recent US invasion of horse artillery. The San Patricios were responsible for the toughest battles encountered by the United States in its invasion of Mexico, with Ulysses S. Grant remarking that Churubusco proved to be about the severest battle fought in the Valley of Mexico. Composed primarily of Catholic Irish immigrants, the battalion also included Germans, Canadians, English, French, Italians, Poles, Scots, Spaniards, Swiss, and Mexicans, many of whom were members of the Catholic Church. The engagements they fought in was the Siege of Fort Texas, the Battle of Monterrey, the Battle of Buena Vista, the Battle of Cerro Gordo, the Battle of Churubusco, and the Battle for Mexico City. He had a very nice battalion's flag, which should be shown. And their colours were Turkish blue, sky blue, crimson, and yellow. Next, we're going to talk about a naval officer called John Barry. He was also Irish. He was born in County Wexford in Ireland, and he was an officer in the Continental Navy during the American Revolutionary War and later in the United States Navy. He came to be widely credited as the father of the American Navy, although John Paul Jones and John Adam also share that moniker, and find it interesting that they all share their first names with each other. Something about John's and founding the US Navy, it seems. He was appointed a captain in the Continental Navy on December 7th, 1775. He was the first captain placed in command of a US warship commissioned for service under the Continental flag. After the war, he became the first commissioned US naval officer at the rank of Commodore, receiving his commission from President George Washington in 1797. And to go along with him, there's William Brown, who was also Irish. He was born in County Mayo as opposed to County Wexford, and he was actually the founder of the Argentine Navy. He was called William Brown, but he was given the nickname Guillermo Brown. The two L's in Spanish, I always forget how they're pronounced. He was an Irish-born Argentine admiral. Brown's victories in the Independence War, the Cisplatin War, and the Anglo-French blockade of the Rio de la Plata earned him the respect and appreciation of the Argentine people, and he is still regarded as one of Argentina's national heroes. Creator and first admiral of the country's maritime forces, he is commonly known as the father of the Argentine Navy. He also did serve with the Royal Navy when he was press-ganged, however, but he returned to the Argentine Navy afterwards. And the last person I will mention is the person mentioned at the start when discussing the Irish Military Diaspora in its generality. Owen O'Neill, who was a Gaelic Irish soldier and one of the most famous of the O'Neill dynasty of Ulster in Ireland. I'm not a member of the O'Neill dynasty. I'm O'Connor, which I think is just as good. O'Neill left Ireland at a young age and spent most of his life as a mercenary in the Spanish army serving against the Dutch in Flanders during the 80 Years' War. Following the Irish Rebellion of 1641, O'Neill returning took command of the Ulster Army of the Irish Confederates. He enjoyed mixed fortunes over the following years, but won a decisive victory at the Battle of Benburb in 1646. Large-scale campaigns to capture Dublin and Sligo were both failures. O'Neill's later years were marked by infighting amongst the Confederates, and he led his army to seize power in the capital of Kilkenny. His troops clashed with the rival forces of the Confederacy, leading to O'Neill forming a temporary alliance with Charles Coote's English parliamentary forces in Ulster. He initially rejected a treaty of alliance between the Confederates and the Irish Royalists, but faced with the Cromwellian invasion, he changed his mind. Shortly after agreeing an alliance with the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland Ormond, in which he was promised an earldom, he died Tuesday, 6th of November, 1649. So that's all of the units and people that I'm going to mention for this recording. I will likely expand on some of them and talk about more of them in future recordings, however, as the Irish Military Diaspora and its history is something I find incredibly interesting, and I hope everyone else does as well. Thank you for listening.